So again, good evening, everyone. I am Tiffany Feingold. I'm the co-founder of Guiding Bright Minds. Thank you so much for joining. This is our webinar presentation number 2 in a series of 3 that we're doing on self-care. So if you missed our first one, we do have a page on YouTube. Look under Guiding Bright Minds, and you'll see our first kickoff of our series by Brandon with Untapped Learning. It was an excellent presentation that talked about executive functioning. So if you guys don't know where executive functioning, when it's organization, time management, your child walks out the door and forgets his homework every day, but does a good job doing it. So it's a great presentation. So it's out there on YouTube. And then our next one is next week on the 12th. So be sure to tune in for that. And more information I will give to you at the end of the presentation on that. So first, I do want to kick off and say again, thank you to everyone for taking your time. I know time is precious. I know as parents, we don't have a lot of it. And for you to dedicate this next hour to focusing on your self-care, focusing on how we can improve our wellness, because we all know that as we re-energize, rejuvenate, replenish, us as parents only helps us be better parents to our children. And I know it's the last thing on our minds to do. So thank you so much for being part of this presentation. So before I introduce Gina and get started, I want to talk a little bit about Guiding Bright Minds. And I also want to talk about Untapped Learning. Untapped Learning is, they were heavily involved in putting this presentation together. So thank you to them for what they've done, what they know is important in self-care. And so let me tell you just a little bit. Untapped Learning, which was formerly known as Stride, opened in 2018, and their focus parallels his own, which is Brandon, to help students with executive functioning challenges, specifically ADHD and dyslexia. Untapped Learning currently mentors hundreds of students with executive functioning challenges and has centers in Broomfield and Centennial. And one of the things I want to say, some of you might be from Colorado, some of you may not be, but I do want to send my condolences. Brandon and his family, sorry, it's kind of getting me emotional, but anyway, sorry. Brandon and his family are from Boulder County, and as many of you know, there was a fire on the day before Christmas Eve where 6,200 acres were burned and 1,000 homes. So I just want to say that, Guiding Bright Minds is thinking about all those people impacted. And I know Brandon and Untapped Learning was personally impacted. So thoughts and prayers out to them. Sorry, I get emotional easily, one of those parent things. So I just wanted to say that. And let me talk about Guiding Bright Minds. My husband and I founded it a year ago. And as a parent of a neurodiverse child, I know how overwhelming and exhausting and challenging it can be to be a parent. And because of our experiences, we wanted to put together an organization that built a community to help parents, where we're coming together with the professionals who offer these amazing services, who really partner and work together to help our bright children. And so when we talk about the frustrations as a parent to find out, how do I find the right professional? How do I find the right team to work with my child? That is one of our commitment as an organization, is to really find those professionals and help you on that journey of vetting through those that are qualified, those that are dedicated. So if you haven't checked out Guiding Bright Minds, if you haven't gone to our website, please do, because we have numerous professionals who focus on neurodiversity, who focus on learning differences, and who want to make a difference and be part of a community that helps parents on their journey. We also offer a lot of education just like this, free webinars, free services. And I don't want to be the driver of that ship. So thank you. Many people have reached out. There's ways to ask questions, to give comments, to offer suggestions. Hey, Tiffany, what about babysitters that specialize in neurodiversity? What about sports leagues that specialize. So we really want to be that one-stop shop that helps all of our parents on their journey. And like I said, you know, I know firsthand what that's like. So it is tough, and that's why we want to do what we can to provide ease and comfort as much as we can on that journey for you. So I will put a link to our information down below, so you can check out our website, check out our directory, all the tools and resources that we have out there. I love the analogy that one parent, you know, said to me is, when you think about it, when you're on your plane and they say in the case of emergency, you have to put your oxygen mask on before you put your child's. That's what we're doing, is how to equip ourselves, how to have that oxygen mask, be able to breathe in order to help our amazing children. So let me introduce now to you Gina Mead. Gina has worked in education and the mental health field in a variety of capacities since 2008 as a healthcare or as a health prevention and social emotional learning lead in Douglas County School District. Gina works with teachers and students on increasing physical, mental, and emotional health and wellness. She and her team support schools and charter leadership education, fostering empathy and compassion in a classroom, self-regulation and executive functioning skills, and increasing physical activity. They also support schools with bullying and suicide prevention, trauma, responsive teaching and learning, implementing comprehensive health curriculum, and overall student and staff wellness. Additionally, Gina is her second year of master's level program for clinical counseling. So thank you, Gina. So excited to have you tonight.
Oh my gosh, Tiffany, thank you so much for that warm welcome. And I also want to echo your comments about the families that have experienced great tragedy in our area. And I think that your emotions are a beautiful thing. And I'm going to guess that you're not alone with having your emotions right at the surface. And so I think it models a wonderful way to be vulnerable and be very human with us. And so thank you for that. I'm just thrilled to be here. I'm honored to be here. Tiffany's organization, Guiding Bright Minds, and Brandon's organization, Untapped Learning, are both doing amazing things in the community, and it's truly an honor to be here with you all tonight. We're talking tonight a little bit about self-care, self-maintenance. How do we keep that oxygen mask on ourselves first so that we can be available to take care of those around us as well? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and launch into the presentation for tonight. And as Tiffany mentioned, please put your thoughts, questions in the chat, in the Q&A, and at the end of the presentation, we will get to them. So here we go. We're starting off with self-care, self-maintenance for parents. Again, my name is Gina Mead. I have worked with Douglas County School District since 2013. I'm also a proud graduate of Douglas County School District, and a parent in the district as well. My children, although not, I guess I should say, neurotypical learners, my children are, they both have experienced lots of challenges in schools, which has given me great empathy and great compassion for all parents, especially those with children with special needs and neurodiverse learners. I love this photo. Parenting isn't stressful at all. And here's our friend Jessica at the age of 27. I hope that brings a smile to your face. I identify with Miss Jessica as well, because I think we both have the same hair colorist. So as Tiffany mentioned, you know, parenting in any realm is a difficult and challenging thing, and it can definitely lead to stress and burnout and compassion fatigue. And so what can we do on a daily basis to keep our own fuel tank full so that we can be there for others? That's our topic for tonight. The objectives for tonight's talk are: number one, to gain a deeper understanding of the three components of self-care; number two, to discuss strategies for ongoing self-care practice; and number three, to create a self-care plan. And I want to preface this talk by saying that the fact that you showed up tonight is a radical act of self-care, because you chose to be here. You chose to put yourself first, or at least near the top of your list. So already we are practicing self-care. The topics that we're going to go through tonight as well, I just want to mention that, you know, if a person is in an acute situation, such as our friends and loved ones up in Boulder County, or anyone who is going through an acute trauma, acute situation, the strategies that I'm going to offer tonight may or may not be useful. I don't want to minimize the impact of basics of self-care, but I also want to acknowledge that if a person is in acute distress or acute trauma, that they would definitely need some support beyond what we're going to talk about tonight. I love this quote from Drs. Norcross and Barnett. They say self-care is an ethical imperative. And Drs. Norcross and Barnett authored an article that appeared in the American Psychological Association magazine, and it was titled "Self-Care as an Ethical Imperative." And it talks about how folks in the helping profession really need to view self-care as a part of their code of ethics. In fact, in the APA, American Psychological Association, and also in the counselor codes of ethics, self-care shows up. And so I mention this because for healing, people in the healing professions, we are ethically mandated to practice self-care. And while parents don't necessarily have a code of ethics that we have to abide by or adhere to for any sort of parenting license, so to speak, I think just as equally, self-care is an ethical imperative for us as well. The doctors Norcross and Barnett define self-care as the daily process of being aware of and attending to one's basic physiological and emotional needs, including the shaping of one's daily routine, relationships, and environment as needed to promote self-care. So just to make sure that we have kind of a collective definition of what we're talking about tonight. This next slide, I want to take a moment, and I'm going to quiet myself a little bit here in a moment. I'd like you to read through these questions. And no one's going to ask you for your answers. You don't have to share this with anyone but yourself. But I'd like you to take a moment here just in silence. Read through these questions. Answer them to yourself as honestly as you can. And then as you're answering these questions, ponder and consider, if my answer is no, what might be getting in the way? All right, so for many of us, there were a few no's on this list, myself included, and my hope is by the end of our time together, we have maybe one or two more yeses that show up on this list. Diving into the three elements of self-care, I love this graphic because it shows the physical, the mental, and the emotional areas of self-care. But what it shows is that they are interconnected. Right? Another way to think of this, some folks like the term mind, body, and spirit, right? So mind being mental, body being physical, spirit being emotional. Whatever speaks to you is the framework that I think we should use. But really importantly, to notice the interconnectedness of these three aspects. And this just makes sense, right? For instance, if I'm working on the physical aspects of self-care, and let's say one of my goals is to increase my movement during the day, and we're going to talk about some strategies how we can do that. But let's say one of my strategies is to walk to the mailbox every day instead of stopping in my car or having somebody else do it. My goal is to walk to the mailbox once a day. If I make that small, consistent change to my physical self-care plan, it's going to naturally impact the mental, emotional areas as well. So these three areas, while we are going to consider them individually, I think it won't surprise any of us to remember and to realize that they are all very interconnected. And there is reams of research and studies out there that show the interconnectedness of these three areas. We'll talk a little bit more about that down the line. I want to share with you one option for a self-care plan. Now, if you were to Google self-care template, you'd probably get about 30,000 options. I really like this one for a few reasons. It talks about those three different areas, mind, body, and spirit, but then it's also very strengths-based. So you see in the left corner, it talks about the supportive people in my life. Yeah, who can I tap into? What connections, what relationships can I tap into to help me implement and execute my self-care plan? And then in the right corner, it talks about goals. So not only is it strengths-based, but it's also goals-based. What do I want to accomplish? And I think that's where we need to start when we think about a self-care plan, because let's see, it's January 5th. And so classically, this time of the year, many of us would be thinking, I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking. I'm going to become a vegan. I'm going to run a marathon, right? And I'm going to meditate every day. I've had that as my self-care plan many years ago. Well, that's just not feasible. Right? What are my real goals? And I encourage you to consider what do you want to accomplish here? What really are your goals? Maybe it's, I want to nourish myself so that when things get really tough with my kiddo, I don't lose it and I don't snap and I don't say and do things that I wish that I didn't. Maybe that's a self-care goal. Maybe it's, I want to be able to walk up and down the stairs without losing my breath, right? Maybe it's, I want to reconnect with people in my life who I haven't been able to connect with for the past couple of years. And I know I'm going to have to get creative in order to do that. Right? So these goals don't have to be these massive, mega goals. I really encourage you, when you think about this work, really peel back the layers and really ask yourself, what is it that I truly want to accomplish here? And I think when we start with what we want to accomplish, and then we add in the supportive people in our lives, the mind, body, and spirit self-care plan evolves a little bit more organically. So let's take a moment, and I want you to think about the things that you're already doing, because I know that there's a lot of self-maintenance, a lot of self-care happening out there right now. So I want you to think a moment. If you have a piece of paper and a pen near you, great, grab it. If not, just maybe close your eyes and think for a moment. What is it that I'm already doing to nourish and nurture myself? And then if you want, maybe you can think of a couple of people who you might put in that supportive people box. And maybe consider what your goals would be for this work.
Gina, do we want to maybe have people share some of the stuff in the chat, or?
I think that would be wonderful. Thanks for jumping in, Tiffany. If you feel comfortable, I don't, this is totally optional, but if you feel comfortable sharing out, I think that would be wonderful. And Tiffany, maybe you want to share.
Yes. You know, for me, and it's starting off small, I'll just say something brief real quick too, because I think like all parents, like it's so overwhelming because I think you think there's so much I need to do. I literally just started with meditating 2 minutes. It's like, and because, and then I was proud of myself. I'm like, good, you accomplished 2 minutes. Now let's go to 5. But for me, everyone's like, you need to work out for 30 minutes. You need to meditate for 20 minutes. You need to do all this. And I'm like, I can't. I started with 2 minutes. So that's where I began.
And I think you bring up a really good point. 2 minutes is fantastic. And it really, the research shows us, and we'll talk about this when we get into mind and spirit, the research shows that 10 deep, slow breaths can shift us from that sympathetic fight or flight to the parasympathetic rest and digest. 10 breaths. Doesn't have to be, you know, you don't have to break out the robe and the mala beads and shave your head. 10 breaths. 10 breaths. So I'm not seeing a whole lot show up in the chat, but I do want to acknowledge, Tiffany, in the Q&A, we did have a question about having access to closed captioning, and I don't know the answer to that.
Oh, sorry. I did not see that. Yes, I think, let me figure that out. I will work on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
And I see Sherry's comments. Thank you. Exercise isn't about getting, thank you for your candor. A physically fit body. It's about keeping your brain right. Meditate daily and solo dance parties. Excellent. Sherry, you are my peeps. We're going to talk about dance parties. Let's see, looks like you do 22-second wall sit, 22 squats, 22 push-ups because it's 2022. Good. Karen says she's honoring where she's at, feeling like what looks like some overwhelm. My issue is taking care of my parents and my 9-year-old, truly in the sandwich generation. How do I keep my peace? Yeah, it looks like you got some fans out there as well. So we're going to dive into each of these 3 areas. Thank you to those of you who popped in the chat, and we'll continue on our journey here in this presentation, diving into the physical body. So what can we do physically? I love the 22 planks, 22 second wall sit. Make it fun, right? And make it have meaning to you as well. Broken record, we've all heard this how many times? We've got to get back to basics. We've got to take care of hydration, nourishment, rest, and movement. But when things get really, really tough, and when I notice that I'm starting to spin out of control, I come back to the basics. Am I hydrated? Right? Mayo Clinic is now recommending 2 liters of water or fluids a day. And that doesn't include, unfortunately, it doesn't include good things like frappuccinos or an old-fashioned. Unfortunately, those aren't on the list. So what can we do to get our 2 liters of water a day? You might have seen they make these amazing water bottles that have like time stamps on the side of them. So it'll say like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. And it's a good way to keep track of how much water you're drinking throughout the day. Dehydration, signs of dehydration are dry skin, chapped lips, and nosebleeds. And I got to tell you, I've lived in Colorado much of my life. I have yet to meet a Coloradan who doesn't have dry skin, chapped lips, and gets nosebleeds, especially in the winter. So in essence, most, if not all of us, are walking around dehydrated all day long. So when in doubt, push the fluids, get the water. And as we know, remember back to that trifecta, when we nourish the body with hydration and water, that's going to impact our brain, our mental outlook. It's going to make everything better. Speaking about nourishment, when I was growing up, we had the 4 food groups, right? That's what we were taught, was the 4 food groups. And then it turned into the food pyramid. Some of you might remember the food pyramid. This link, let's see if I can get to it. Come on, technology. This brings us to the Harvard healthy eating plate. Tiffany, can you see this? I think you probably can. It's the healthy eating plate. Check it out. Majority of your plate is vegetables.
Yes, sorry, I can see this.
You got it.
I'm
Okay.
gonna work on the closed captioning.
Okay. We got whole grains and protein, small amount of fruits. But what I love about this, first of all, that vegetables makes up the majority of the plate. We also talk about healthy oils, right? And here's that water again. So again, growing up in the 80s, we had those snack wells, fat-free. Everything was fat-free. So I would sit down and power down a pack of those snack wells cookies because they were fat-free, and without truly realizing that I just digested, probably 1,200 calories, including mostly sugar. So I like this. If you want to geek out on nutrition, I think this Harvard healthy eating plate is a great place to go. My sense is that most of us know what we should be eating. It's just, hey, Gina, I'm overwhelmed. I have this much time, and it's a lot easier for me to run through the drive-through when I've got my kids and I've got this much time. I get it, right? We've got to take baby steps. One area that I've changed in my life that I think might be a great place to start is with sugars. World Health Organization talks about the consumption of sugars, and they recommend 25 to 50 grams of sugar a day. And so what does that mean? Well, one Jolly Rancher candy has 11 grams of sugar. One can of Coke has 49 grams of sugar. If you really take a look at those numbers and try to stay under 50, it's kind of alarming how much sugar we actually ingest all day long. So maybe that's part of your self-care plan is, I'm not going to make any changes, but I'm going to investigate and I'm going to get real curious. And I'm just going to start to track what my sugars look like for 1 week. Now that World Health Organization recommendation of 25 to 50 grams of sugar is added sugar, right? It's added sugar and things like honey, sweetener, and juice. Right? So when you look at the back of your label, you're going to look for added sugars. Okay, let's talk for a minute about sleep. We all know we need sleep, and we all know that without sleep, nothing works properly in the body. Naps, if you can squeeze them in, is great. I think we've all seen the research around sleep routines and hygiene. Creating a consistent schedule is key. So if I know I want to hit the pillow at 10 o'clock, I'm going to turn my phone off, my computer off at 9 o'clock to get those blue waves out of my brain. And then if possible, can I create a consistent sleep routine? I'm going to make a cup of tea. I'm going to go and do my legs up the wall yoga practice where I lay down and just put my legs up the wall for 10 minutes, maybe read a book. What can you do that could be consistent and regular with sleep? I want to talk for a minute about a new phenomenon that psychologists are finding with sleep. And what they're finding is that people are using staying up late and binge watching shows or scrolling through social media as a reward. So if we feel like we've given all of ourselves all day long, and then finally at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, things quiet down, out of defiance, people are binge watching until 1, 2 in the morning. they're scrolling, because it's like, finally I have a minute to myself, and I'm just gonna, I know it's not good for me, but I'm gonna keep doing it because I can. And I know I fall into that camp from time to time. There's a couple of shows that I've definitely stayed up way too late and I continue to watch. And it's almost that same reward center as other things that can be addictive. Sugar, alcohol, food. It's almost that same reward center is what they're finding. So I drop that in here just to create a little bit of awareness, because maybe you're in the same camp as I am and you're using that time to fill a need and to fill a void that could be filled by a healthier alternative. Let's talk for a minute about movement. Movement can be how can I put this? It can be a lot easier than we think it is to add more movement into our day, right? I've got teacher friends. I work with teachers all day long. And I've got a group of teachers at one of our elementary schools, and they have this challenge with each other. Every time they pull up into the parking lot, they get out of their car and they take a lap around the school before they walk in the building, right? And just by doing that, every time they pull into the parking lot, they've increased their movement. You know, it's probably a quarter mile to get fully around the school, and they support each other with that. They all come in about the same time and they take that one lap. So think about, how can I just add steps into my day? I put yoga here because I'm a recovering yoga instructor, and yoga seems to be a way to add movement that's appealing to a lot of people. Walking and hiking, jump on that All Trails app. That's a great app to find good short hikes in your area. And then someone in the chat mentioned dancing. I got to show you guys my new favorite thing. It's called 30-second dance party. 30-second dance party, and it's this button. And I'm not going to push it because I don't know how it would sound. But you push the button and it lights up and it plays 30 seconds of the goofiest music ever. And it goes for 30 seconds and you just dance like crazy. And then when it stops, you're done, right? I got these for my kids, my teenagers, for Christmas, and they totally rolled their eyes and they were mortified that I would buy this for them. But let me tell you, we've been having so much fun having dance parties in the kitchen. So we have some gifts that we're going to be giving out, raffle, at the end of these 3 talks. And I've got 5 30-second dance parties that I'm going to donate, and we're going to raffle off at the end of the 3 sessions. So I encourage you to get silly and get creative with movement. Like our friend in the chat said, 22 push-ups, 22-second wall sits. Tiffany, I'm going to pause and catch my breath. Is there anything popping up in the chat that we should address at this point with physical self-care? I think she might have stepped away here. Okay, we'll keep going. I'm seeing some great stuff in the chat. Thank you,
Sorry,
guys.
I had put myself on mute, but I do see on the Q&A early on, somebody had asked, you know, how do I get my son to stop suppressing his feelings? I know that's not self-care, but, you know, it's an area, and I think that's an excellent question, because that's like mine, who's now 8.5, is finally starting to, but I know it's extremely tough to get him to talk or share anything.
I love that question. And we're going to touch on that in the emotional piece. So thank you for bringing that to mind. I don't want to jump the gun. I have a couple of ideas. And my guess is that if we had time for the folks who are on this call to kibitz and get together and share ideas, that there's a wealth of knowledge in this group. So when we get to emotional, I'm going to share a couple of ideas about this exact topic of how do we, first of all, become aware of our emotions and allow them, allow them to be. So thank you. Thank you for that. When I think of mental self-care, remember that's our second piece of the puzzle here. I think, what can I do to allow my nervous system to feel supported and to shift from fight or flight to rest and digest, from that sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. And so when I'm working with kids and teachers, students, staff, everybody sees me coming and they give me this sign. And some of you might know what this is. And for those of you who don't, I'm going to teach it to you here. So everybody give me 5. I can't see you, but I'm going to trust that you've got your hand up in the air. Those of you who are able to place your hand up into the air. Your hand is going to represent your brain. And then place your thumb into the center of your hand. The thumb in the center of the hand represents the amygdala. The amygdala is the fight or flight center. It's the stress center. It's the part of our brain that acts like a watchdog, always looking out for danger. It's the part of the brain that actually grows very small in size when it becomes triggered by an external or internal stimulus, the amygdala. When you wrap your fingers around your thumb, again, this is your brain. If it was sitting in my skull, here we would have the prefrontal cortex. The fingers represent the prefrontal cortex. That's your thinking brain. That's your wise old owl. That's the part of the brain that governs executive function, which Brandon talked about so beautifully in our last session. The prefrontal cortex and the amygdala talk to each other, right? Until or unless the amygdala gets overwhelmed in what's often called amygdala hijack, and we flip our lid. And in that case, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. The Wi-Fi is cut between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And therefore, our thinking brain, our wise old owl, our reasoning brain, our executive functioning is no longer working to the capacity that it could when we weren't triggered. So what can I do to keep my brain in this state rather than this state? And that's what I think of when I think of mental self-care, right? Step number 1 is knowing in your body what it feels like when you start to flip your lid, right? When I'm working with kids, I say, hey guys, sometimes you get a lump in your throat. Sometimes you feel like you're going to throw up and you get butterflies. Sometimes you get cold hands and feet, and we talk about the physiology of stress. Sometimes you get a headache, right? And I have them put their hand on the part of their body where they feel it when they start to flip their lid. Because step number 1 is awareness of what's going on in your body and normalizing the physiological response to stress. So now that we know what it feels like when we start to flip our lid, what can we do in that moment? Mental self-care, acute mental self-care in that moment would include things like, maybe it's touch, maybe it's grabbing the weighted blanket, the weighted scarf, putting on some socks, right? More long-term support for the nervous system might be things like music and creativity. What are we doing with art, journaling, flowers? How are we building connections and relationships with other people to nourish our nervous system? Animal therapy, those of you with animals, this isn't a surprise to you. Giving the dog a belly rub or cuddling with the cat is a great way to nurture and nourish the nervous system. Breathing strategies, y'all probably have, as parents of neurodiverse learners, y'all probably have a toolbox of breathing strategies, your go-to breathing strategies. Yep, mine with kids are roller coaster, breathing in as the roller coaster goes up, breathing out as the roller coaster goes down. 5 slow, deep breaths can help shift us from that flipped lid state to the calm and collected state. If you want or need breathing strategies, hit me up with my email and I can send you gads of them. There's so many great ones. I want to talk for a minute about mindset. Another piece of the brain that I'm sure many of us already know and that neuroscience is teaching us is that we are hardwired for negativity. And that's a physiological survival skill. The saying goes that our brains are Velcro to the negative and Teflon to the positive, right? We're hardwired to seek out negativity in order to keep ourselves alive. So if I'm walking down a street and there's a dog, an angry dog chasing me, my brain is going to log in the file, don't go down that street again, right? Because I'm always looking for negativity. Now that we know that the brain is hardwired for negativity, and sidebar, those of us with teenagers, amplified negativity, what can we do to shift from a negative mindset to a positive mindset? And the research shows that gratitude is one simple and easy and effective way to flip the switch in the brain from that negative mindset to a more positive outlook. And there's a wonderful app called 3 Good Things. I encourage you to check it out. It's a free app. The way that it works is that you can set it up to remind you at a certain time of day. Maybe it's 7 in the morning, maybe it's 9 o'clock at night, to type in your 3 good things. And that's all it is. You type in 3 good things that happened that day. This is not mine, this is somebody else's. And you can see their 3 good things. Here's another one. 3 people, sunshine, weekend, kids playing in the snow. You get the idea. The research shows that if every day we can come up with and remind ourselves of 3 positive things that have happened to us that day, or 3 things that we're grateful for, it physiologically changes the brain. And you can look up the brain scans of folks who have a gratitude practice, and you can see how it physiologically changes the brain. And it just feels good. Moving into the emotional self-care, our spirit, this is where we talk about things like mindfulness. I'm a mindfulness practitioner and instructor, and so this is top of my list. There's so many apps out there. Some of you probably use them. Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer. There's some great ones for kids as well. This is where we talk about acceptance of emotions, right? And someone brought it up in the chat. How do I support my kids in not suppressing their emotions, right? And I'm not going to purport to be an expert on this subject, but I can tell you from my own personal experience a couple of things that help. Number 1, we need to model acceptance of emotions. And Tiffany did it so beautifully at the beginning of our talk. It's getting me a little emotional just thinking of her. We need to model that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be disappointed. There's this concept that you might have heard of called toxic positivity, and it's showing up in a lot of our schools where teachers are kind of being sent the message to buck up and, you know, just we gotta find the good. We gotta just keep going with the good. And while that does have a place in our life, I think it's so powerful to show our kids when we're experiencing big emotions. It normalizes what's happening with us, and they learn from us that we don't have to pretend that everything's okay. So being honest and vulnerable with our kids to the degree that we can, I think is a great first step. There's also some wonderful tools out there. There's one called the Mood Meter. The Mood Meter. If you look that up, it gives kids language. I'm doing this because it's actually like a needle, and it shows what mood someone is in. Again, normalizing that there are no bad emotions, right? Emotions move through us, and there's no such thing as a good or a bad emotion. There might be one that feels better, joy, happiness, excitement, than sadness, despair, right? But all emotions are to be accepted and welcomed. The other tool that I would encourage you to look at is an emotion wheel. And again, you can Google emotion wheel. Some of you probably already are completely aware of this. If we can expand our vocabulary around emotions, it takes away some of the power of challenging emotions. And the term that we use is name it to tame it. You probably heard that one before. But if we can expand our vocabulary of emotions, it takes away some of the power of the emotion. Let me give you an example. Kiddo comes to me in tears, right? Just sobbing in tears. And I say, hey, dude, you know, what's going on? You look like you've got some emotions coming up. And they say, I'm just sad. I'm really, really sad. All right, well, let's peel that back a little bit. What's going on? What's really going on with you? And by peeling back in a non-judgmental way and being with them in a place of empathy and compassion, right? And allowing them to feel what they're feeling, maybe we can get to, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed because I was out at the playground. I was out at recess and my friends told me I couldn't play with them. I'm frustrated, right? If we can expand that emotional vocabulary, it tends to take away a little bit of the power of the emotion. I read, recently I read a quote that said, we think by moving away from big and difficult emotions that it's going to take the power away from the emotion. But in fact, leaning into that big, challenging, difficult emotion is what takes power away. Also on this list, tapping into spirituality, whatever that means to you, prayer, meditation, sitting in silence, communing with others, laughter. Laughing, I think, is a great way to build emotional self-care. Nature, let me talk for a minute about nature. There's a beautiful book by Florence Williams, I believe her name is, and she wrote a book called The Nature Fix. And just real quick, I want to share with you a study in The Nature Fix. For years, she did a longitudinal study on people living in Japan, in high rises, in big city centers. And what she found over the years of data collection is that people who live, well, let me take a step back. The study was looking at people who lived in a high rise with a view of green space, a view of nature, versus people who lived with a view of the city without any nature. And so she did this study, and other scientists and other researchers, identifying folks who lived in big high rises in Japan. And over a number of years, they studied the people who lived on the side of the building that had a view of green space, open space, nature, compared to the folks who lived on the other side of the building that looked into the city, concrete, cars, other buildings. So again, you've got folks on this side being able to look out and see nature, folks on this side not so. What they found is that the life expectancy of the people who had a view of nature was significantly greater. They weren't hiking, they weren't running marathons, they weren't even necessarily getting out in nature, but just the vision of nature out their window compared to vision of city center changed their life expectancy. So I bring this up because nature is so powerful. And it doesn't, again, you don't have to hike a 14er. You don't have to be crazy color red and hike a 14er. This is a plastic plant, right? Just having the presence of something that appears natural can shift our mood and change things for the better. We talk here about service. What are we doing to give to others? We talk here about organizing a space, cleaning a space. If you're a Marie Kondo fan, maybe you see what sparks joy, and if it doesn't, you donate it. Compassionate boundaries are on this list as well. Brene Brown, any Brene Brown fans out there? She has amazing videos on saying no and what that looks like to say no. And then I'm going to finish talk. I know we're coming up on time. I'm going to finish our talk with a short video from Dr. Kristen Neff, Stanford researcher, and Dr. Chris Germer, Harvard researcher, on the power of self-compassion, because I think often what's missing in our self-care plan is self-compassion. So let's see if technology is going to be on my side here.
Hi, Kaz. Hi, Shelley. As you know, we are producing a course called The Power of Self-Compassion. So we're just talking to people today about how they treat themselves. Do you have a critical voice? And if so, what do you find it saying to you?
I definitely have a critical voice. I think everybody does. And I think they all start from when you're a kid. So, I think all the things that my parents said, I hear, but it's normally about not doing a good job.
It's constantly stopping me as I try to complete thoughts or try to make steps forward.
It's a voice that always tells me that I'm not enough, or that I need to do better, or that there's something about me that I have to change.
When you fail or make a mistake, what types of things run through your mind?
I'm not worthy. Everybody's going to see my mistake. Nobody else makes mistakes like I do.
You're stupid. I can't believe you forgot something easy. This was basic. Why are you having so much trouble doing something so simple?
People don't want me around, that I'm uninteresting, boring, and or just too weird for people's company.
It says that I should have done better, and sometimes it says mean words about myself.
It's probably the loudest thing that's usually coming through my head before anything else, is at least ringing that failure over and over again.
And let me give you a scenario where a friend of yours comes to you, has made a mistake, and what would you say to that friend?
Well, the first thing I would tell them that it's okay. You don't need to feel all the weight of this.
Most likely you're holding on to this more tightly than anybody else.
This in no way, reflects your character or reflects your ability to do something. Definitely a lot kinder to my friends than I am to myself.
How do you think you would change if you used that same voice that you use towards your friends on yourself during those moments of failure and mistakes?
I think it would be, incredible, because you're not going to talk to your friends the way that you talk to yourself sometimes. And I think that if you're constantly kind of reassuring yourself and letting yourself know that you are enough, then your thought process will change.
When you treat yourself like you do somebody else, you start feeling better, I think, right away, and you keep it in context much more instead of letting things be blown out of proportion.
I think I would have a lot less anxiety in my day-to-day. I think there would be kind of a weight lifted.
It would definitely make me feel better and happier, because when I usually say, when that voice that says mean stuff in my head, I'm not really happy and sad.
How could the world look differently if we were more compassionate towards ourselves?
I think the world would work better. I think through compassion and self-compassion, we all would just recognize that we're all human.
As a society, we could learn to love one another and show that love on a regular basis. I think that this world would be perfect.
There's a saying that if you love yourself, then you can love others. Well, sometimes I believe it goes in the reverse, and that if you can show that compassion that you show to others and bring it into yourself, I think that's where true growth can happen.
I think it would be magical. That's really the only word for it, magical, to be able to reflect on ourselves from a place of love rather than criticism.
That one gets me every time. I think self-compassion, like I mentioned, is a piece that's often overlooked and often missing in our self-care plan. So I'm going to try here and get back to our presentation just for one more minute and show that self-care plan one more time. Hopefully this will work for me here. Thanks for your patience while I try and do this. Okay. Now I'll share one more time. And we're back. Okay, so if we go back to that self-care plan, my hope after today's talk is that you maybe have one or two ideas for each of these circles: mind, body, and spirit. These are a couple of filled out plans. I love this. Ask for help. Shower, brush my hair. It doesn't have to be big. I'm gonna journal and play with my dog. These are the folks who can support me, and these are my goals. Relinquish some control. How about that? Here's Ignacio's self-care plan. I'm gonna drink some tea. I'm gonna sleep. I'm looking for peace, serenity, good work, be a good person. Here they've got their people who can help. For my mind, I'm going to be a lifelong learner and take lots of breaks. I'll finish with this quote from poet and educator Audre Lorde. I've come to believe that caring for myself is not self-indulgent. Caring for myself is an act of survival. And with that, it doesn't look like I left much time, Tiffany. Do we have any pressing questions and thoughts we want to get to?
That's okay. Thank you so much, Gina. This was amazing. You know, it is, even though there's so many times we hear different things, it's always good to remind ourselves of getting back to the basics, really, you know, simplifying our lives too, and doing it one step at a time. So thank you so much. Let's open it up for Q&A. You guys see the Q&A section on the bottom. Is there any other questions that you guys have? I know we're at the top of the hour. Want to make sure, but thank you. This was wonderful, and I saw a lot of wonderful comments in the chat. Those, you know, interested, and let me see if there's anything else that we have. Any other questions? And I think one of the things that you know, you mentioned and we talked about briefly too is just starting one step at a time. You know, when we do look at the whole piece and everything, it can be overwhelming, but that's like me, even starting with 2 minutes of meditation, starting with walking around one block, you know, just made me feel I was accomplishing small things rather than thinking I have to run a marathon. I mean, you know, I was exhausted walking one block. I'm like, okay, at least I did that. Like you even said, sometimes I run up the stairs, I'm like, I'm out of breath, but you know, let's do things a little bit more. So thank you, everyone. I saw the question about the raffle, so thank you, because I forgot to mention that. So we have one more webinar in our series of 3, and that is, let me get all the information. So that is going to be on January 12th from 6 to 7. An invite will go out about that one as well. And we are really focused on goal setting tips and tricks, and really, again, just kind of finalizing all the conversations we have and putting them together and really creating those tools and resources. I did put it in the chat too, that I will be sending out a copy of this presentation and the webinar to all of those who have registered. And the raffle will be after the last session. So we will combine those that attended in session 1, session 2, and session 3. And then at the end of that is when we'll do our raffle. There's a 1 month free yoga and t-shirt from Peace Out Yoga. We have this oak journal, we have mugs, we have music books that's being sent out, some other things, a children's book or a daily thought. So we will definitely have what do you call it? The raffle at the end. So any other questions? Anything that we can do to put in the Q&A? All right. Well, Gina, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Everyone have a wonderful day, a wonderful evening, and appreciate everyone's time.
Thanks, everyone.
Right,
Good night.
bye.